This is an RNZ podcast.
Just a quick warning. This podcast contains language and descriptions of violence some listeners might find confronting.
I would hope any appeal court would squash this nonsense appeal.
Meet the Nark.
It's, for me, dead and buried, and I don't know why anyone would be wanting to clutch at straws other than for a financial benefit of some kind.
In September 2024, after months of research, dead ends, backtracking and cross-checking, I finally found Ernie, the Crown's star witness in its case against Ross Appelgren. He's alive and well, and not at all impressed this case is going back to court.
I don't understand what any appeal to get a different outcome is going to achieve. Just a waste of money and time.
There's a bit of a story behind how he came into contact and eventually met face to face. I'll get to that later in the series. But since I found him, we've had a couple of conversations and exchanged a few emails. I've been able to ask questions and hear his point of view. And it's fair to say, Ernie was pretty stunned to discover Ross's estate was planning to challenge the conviction his testimony helped secure.
I was flabbergasted after all this time that anyone would be wanting to open up such a case again, which was a very open and closed case in my view.
This is the first time Ernie's spoken in the media about this case. And even then, he technically isn't speaking. His identity is suppressed by court order, so this is an actor reading his words.
The persons are all dead and gone now, and it does nothing to bring any of them back, nor the drama in bringing a case of 30 plus years back to life. And for what? Ross was guilty, and if he ever had got off on a technicality now, then that would indicate to me the system was faulty and wrong.
Ernie makes a reasonable point, and it's important you hear his side of things. After all, he played a central role in all this. And if you're wondering,
Ross was guilty of doing the hit.
He's adamant the right man was convicted, and he hasn't made anything up.
I never once could have said I made this up, as it did happen. There's no advantage to me making up a story to suit anyone. It was tested in court 2 times.
However, this podcast is about what Ross and his lawyers say wasn't tested in court. It's crucial to hear Ernie's responses to the questions not answered, and in some cases, not even asked, in Ross's trials. But I need to set out what those unanswered questions are before we finally get Ernie's take. So let's rewind the tape to explain how I came to resurrect this story in the first place. In 2018, I was rummaging through boxes of documents about a murder. It just wasn't this murder. At the time, I was deep in the trenches of investigating the 1985 death of Arthur Easton and the man who was wrongfully convicted of killing him.
The wrongful conviction of Alan Hall back in 1985 led to the biggest compensation payout in New Zealand's history, and now...
Following an investigation from former New Sub Nation journalist Mike Wesley-Smith.
This isn't my first true crime podcast. My first was called Grove Road, the Alan Hall story.
And we are here today because of what happened through New Sub Nation and Mike Wesley-Smith.
And now, nearly 40 years later, 3 men are facing charges.
The boxes of documents were bits and pieces Alan's family had collected during their fight to clear his name. And amongst it all, I came across some old cassette tapes. They contained a recording of a 1989 Radio Pacific talkback program about Alan's conviction, hosted by broadcaster Brian Edwards.
I'm going to be talking to Shirley Hall, and then we're going to ask you to ring and be our jury on the program this morning.
Appearing on the show was Alan's mum, Shirley, his greatest champion.
But I'm still very determined that we're going to get justice, no matter how long it takes us. Because I know Alan's innocent and he's serving time that somebody else should be serving.
During the radio program, a woman named Julie phoned in to express her support for Alan and to talk about another man she believed was failed by the justice system.
As in Alan's case, Ross's case didn't hear all the evidence either.
Yes.
So,
Julie, the talkback caller, was a woman named Julie Whittaker. And yeah, she would later become Julie Appelgren. She spoke with Shirley about her concerns with Ross's murder conviction.
Without all the evidence, I mean, they haven't got a show. A lot of the evidence for Ross's case I first saw, 4 years later?
Yes.
That was the evidence that should have been put to the court.
I'd never heard about Ross Appelgren until I listened to that recording. I reminded myself to return to his case when I got a free moment. Well, that was 2018. Then life happened. Marriage, a mortgage, 4 kids, 2 dogs, and a cat. Alan Hall's conviction was quashed in 2022, but I never forgot the concerns Julie raised all those years ago about some guy called Ross Appelgren. You're listening to Nark, an RNZ investigative podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wesley-Smith. This is episode 5, Ross and Ernie. By now, you may have worked out that the murder charge against Ross would basically come down to who the jury thought was telling the truth. Ernie, the Crown star witness, who said he saw Ross bash Darcy, or Ross, who said he had nothing to do with it. It wouldn't be easy. Both men were hardly exemplars of honesty. Ross had a long list of burglary and theft convictions, while Ernie was in jail on more than 200 fraud charges. And one of them was breaking the law yet again by perjuring himself, brazenly lying to police and the court. But which one? For the jury, it would be a question of which of these 2 men could prove himself the most trustworthy.
An inmate was killed, and I ended up getting the blame for it.
You didn't do it?
No, I didn't.
Ross Appelgren's defence to murder was rather uncomplicated. He couldn't have killed Darcy Tahira because he was in the toilet when it happened.
Who did do it?
I don't know.
Talking to TV3 journalist Keith Davies in 1992, Ross described himself as an old-school crim.
For 18 years in jail, did it never occur to you that perhaps you weren't very good at this and I'll do something else?
Yeah, it did occur to me, yeah. And it has occurred to me now, but it took me a long time to learn. Slow learner.
Ross answered Keith's questions with a sheepish smile, like a teenager trying not to laugh in school assembly. A prison profile described both sides of Ross's character. On the one hand, he was affable, capable, generous, helpful to friends and family. On the other, there was a list of convictions as long as his arm, and an ability to happily mix with the heavy criminal element.
A lifetime of crime.
Yeah.
To describe his appearance, you almost had to look at Ross in 2 parts. From the neck up, he was bookish looking, with a round face, blonde short back and sides, and thick glasses he wore all the time for short-sightedness. A kind of Nigel from Accounts figure. From the neck down, it was a different story. He was broad-shouldered and muscular from lifting weights in prison. With his arms, hands and legs adorned with tattoos, he certainly looked like he could handle himself in a fight.
Are you a bad person?
Some people most probably think I am, but I don't think so. I've never hurt anybody physically. I've done a few things wrong. Some of them I regret.
What are the things you regret, though?
I suppose I've learnt that by stealing off people, it hurts them personally. I regret the waste of time that I spent in jail.
Through 2 High Court trials and 4 trips to the Court of Appeal, Ross maintained his innocence. So either he was a remarkably determined liar or experienced a great injustice. I never met Ross before he died, so to learn more about him, I spoke with his greatest supporter, his soulmate.
Fun-loving. We had a lot of fun together. Awesome family man. Loved my family.
This is Julie again, Ross's widow. We've met her in earlier episodes, and in this one, when she was still Julie Whittaker. Julie's inherited the fight to once and for all clear Ross's name. Julie and Ross were married in 1995 and spent more than 20 years together. The full story of how they met is, well, pretty remarkable, but we'll save that for a future episode. What I can say is Ross clearly loved Julie.
I've always been a fighter, but Julie has given me the strength to fight all the harder.
This is an excerpt from an interview Ross did with New Idea magazine in 1995. And you'll remember, we've used Radio Pacific interviews Ross gave to teach AI the sound of his voice, and then created the clips you'll hear throughout this podcast. So while it's an AI-generated version of his voice, they're words he said in real life. In this case, 30 years ago.
I'm so proud of everything she did for us while I was in prison. I've never wanted to get married to anyone until I met Julie.
In 2024, once I'd got a handle on the mortgage, the kids, the dog and the cat, well, as much as anyone can, I followed up that tape I found in the Hall family boxes of random documents relating to a completely different crime. Hello. Hey, Julie. How are you?
Hi, Mike.
How have you been? You been good? Julie poured me a coffee and we settled on a couch in her lounge to chat about her life with Ross.
We had a lot of fun together. Loved the way of life that we had together.
Fun. It's a word Julie uses often to describe Ross. On the wall, there's a photo of their wedding in 1995.
Obviously, me and Ross in the middle. The rest is all my family.
One that held off on until Ross was paroled.
I suggested that we get married in prison and he wouldn't hear of that.
Prison was where Ross and Julie first met in mid-1989. She was a real estate photographer and a divorced mum of 3. He was an inmate serving a prison sentence for murder.
I got word through my lawyers that Julie wanted to visit me. I didn't know her at the time, of course, and I sent her a pass and she just came to visit me. For the first time in my life, someone who I termed a straight person spoke to me on an even scale.
I think people have learned to expect the unexpected from me. I wanted to meet him.
TV3 journalist Keith Davies spoke to Ross and Julie about that first encounter in a jail visitor's room.
What did you find?
A very warm, compassionate, caring person.
Did either of you have any inkling at this first meeting as to what was going to happen?
No.
No.
You went to meet him?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to meet him again?
Yes.
And again?
Yes.
And again?
Mm.
What kept drawing you back?
I know that this man fascinated me.
An unlikely love between a middle-class mum and a man whose residential address was D Block, Parimoremo.
People thought it was strange, but it wasn't. That's the funny thing. It just seemed pretty natural. We came from very similar backgrounds, but grew up on completely different paths.
When those paths converged, Julie knew scepticism would follow, but it was still unwelcome.
You know, some people have the idea that you take up with someone inside because it's, it's sort of a after the bad boy sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's not me. That isn't me. That's not me.
Once he was finally released, Julie's relationship with her own tattooed Romeo only grew stronger.
After nearly 20 years behind bars, I'd finally found someone and something that I knew was worth living for.
Was he quite a romantic?
Oh, very much so, yes. Stop at a roadside flower stall every Friday and buy me flowers. And he was just a happy chappy. He just loved our way of life, which initially he'd scoffed at because he'd never known it. We went to Queenstown for one of my birthdays. Could have been my 60th. Yeah, that was great. We went to the Amersfield Winery. Don't remember getting back to the motel. Amazing food and wine. Those special things Ross hadn't had. And I suppose I hadn't either. So we were discovering a lot of things together.
Ross became very close with Julie's adult son, daughters and grandchildren.
He was Papa Lollipop. He still is Papa Lollipop when they talk about him, because he'd get lollipops and put them in his pockets and deliver them to the girls. And that's how they still refer to him, even though he's been gone from us for 11 years. He had this big red dressing gown, and they used to wrap up in that on the couch and watch TV. And after he died, I got 2 cushions made out of that dressing gown. Wow. And they took them to the UK with them when they moved. Still got the cushions on their beds. Yeah.
Mind you, when Julie's kids first heard she was seeing a man who'd been convicted of murder, There were naturally some questions.
Julie's family accepted me at first a little guardedly.
Yeah, a little bit of apprehension to start with.
I think it was one of your daughters recounted a funny episode, I think, where she met. I think you met her off the plane and he hid behind the pillar.
Oh, yes, he was, yeah. Oh, well, she was in Australia. She came over to check out this man that her mum was hooked up with. Yeah, initial apprehension, but he cooked a barbecue out the back and she went out and stood next to him and they chatted and she came round. Yeah. They supported me and him, and he was just very much a part of our life.
Julie's youngest daughter and I have a love like father and daughter, and her two older children have accepted me with an openness and affection which I return on the same basis.
Remember, Julie and Ross met while he was in prison. Their relationship growing and remaining strong through the quashing of his conviction, the retrial, and his return to prison to serve the remainder of his sentence for the murder of Darcy Tahira. One of Julie's most poignant memories of Ross was the day her son was married.
I went to the prison for the usual Saturday morning visit, and we were sitting there and my son was getting married later in the day and he walked in. Well, that was very touching, touching, yeah, that he'd taken that time on his wedding day to come and visit Ross, because we'd hoped that Ross could have got out, been out for the wedding, but not to be, so.
Right.
Yeah, my son turned up and that was very special.
Yeah, real sign of their closeness that they had.
Absolutely, very special.
Just like Suzanne Young said about her husband, Darcy, to the justice system, these men were statistics, crims doing time. But Suzanne and Julie describe a different, much more personal side of their husbands.
We used to, my kids scoffed. Yeah, we went on picnics at the beach. But yeah, we did go on picnics in the beach and pack up, sandwiches and strawberries and maybe wine and go and sit at the beach. He loved that. Never got tired of doing that. I knew I'd changed.
With meeting Ross?
Yeah.
And Julie changed Ross as well, in a huge way.
I was a career criminal, but meening Julie made me want to not go back to that life.
There was no fear of him going back to his previous life. I mean, that was his previous life. It was nothing to do with me. Yeah, I know it happened, but that was done and dusted. And I knew that was over with.
And he kept that commitment for the rest of his life.
He did. I never ever said to him, I hope you don't go back and do stuff that you did before. I didn't need to. I never said that. I didn't need to. There was one guard when Ross was leaving prison for the final time, and this guard was seeing him out, and he said, "Oh, you'll be back." Ross never did go back.
For the rest of his working days, Ross was employed as a handyman and painter.
Never went on the dole. There was no benefits. He got work straight away.
Were there any particular hobbies he pursued?
Fishing. Yes, one of his bosses would take him out in the boat, and in fact they took him out, gosh, I think only a couple of weeks before he died.
Right.
He caught a very big fish, which he was pretty proud of. Yeah. What I'm happy about is that we had a happy life together.
Mm.
And so he knew our way of life for many years. Gosh, how many years was it we were married? I can't remember. But he had that for all those years.
Yeah.
The happy life. And so I'm happy that he had that.
Through it all, Julie's dedication to Ross and her belief in his innocence was absolute, as she told Keith Davies in 1993.
You've stuck by him through an extraordinary period. Have you never wavered?
Never. When you find something this good, you don't let go.
31 years later, her position is still the same.
No, I never wavered. Never thought of giving up on it.
No.
Because we'd had so much time together, not just outside, but when he was inside, and bonding like I've never bonded with anybody before. There's some people say a once-in-a-lifetime sort of thing, and it was. I mean,
You never asked him if he did it? No. And that was because... Didn't need to? Is it?
No, didn't need to. No. I didn't ask him a lot of things.
When Julie met Ross, understandably, she wanted to focus on their future together. However, for this podcast, we need to look back into Ross's life before Julie, one he gave a glimpse of to Keith Davies in that 1992 interview.
And you're portrayed as a likeable rogue, but you stole from people. You tried to rob a bank.
Yeah, well, I did rob a bank, but I paid for it too. I got 8 years for it.
Doing crime and paying for it. That characterised most of Ross's adolescence and adulthood. Born in South Auckland in 1951, he was the first of 2 sons. After his father left home in 1953, his mother Iris remarried.
I guess I was like most kids. My parents were loving, kind people, and we lived as an average South Auckland suburban family.
Ross got on well with his mum and his stepfather Morris, whose name, Appelgren, he adopted.
He's been more like a dad to me than my own.
Morris and Ross had similarly rebellious spirits as teenagers. I found a 1941 news article describing a 17-year-old Morris's arrest on charges of theft, conversions of bicycles and mischief. Ross was also a mischief merchant. He had an unsettled education, which is putting it lightly. He cycled through 5 different primary schools, often being moved on for bad behaviour. At 15, he finally dropped out and straight into trouble. Years later, his mum Iris spoke to a journalist about her son's downward spiral. The article was rather dramatically headlined, "Borstal made my boy a bank robber." Iris died in 2017, so her words are voiced.
Ross isn't an out-and-out baddie. He's just a yahoo who's never got the help he's needed. Ross was a silly boy, the type of kid who if someone said, "There goes a cop car, I dare you to yell out," he would. I know he used to think it was a great joke, getting around with boys who'd been in trouble with the police.
Iris blamed a brain hemorrhage Ross sustained in a bad fall when he was only 3 years old. Unconscious for almost 40 hours, Ross suffered regular blackouts, fits of anger and depression for years afterwards. Iris got a job to pay for Ross's medical treatment, hoping his behaviour would improve, but it proved fruitless. According to Iris, wherever she looked for help, people dismissed her, saying,
"I was just a stupid mother trying to make excuses for her son."
One magistrate told Iris she'd done all she could to help Ross, but that
I hadn't done very well at it.
Harsh words for a mum just trying to do her best. In 1965, Ross was convicted of his first burglary aged just 14. His first taste of incarceration followed a few years later.
In 1967, a mate and I stole 3 cars. I can't tell you why. We just went joyriding, dumping them when they ran out of petrol. We were caught. 2 weeks later, we fronted up to the Children's Court in Otahu, and the judge made his disapproval very clear. He was angry, not only over the charges, but also because he thought we were showing contempt.
16-year-old Ross and his mate were bundled off to Waikeria Borstal to start their sentence.
Scared? Hell, I don't know the meaning of the word until I arrived on that dark night. The first screw to greet us was a screamer. Every word was yelled loudly. He placed us in a cell, telling us not to even look out the window or the guy in the tower would shoot us. Then he slammed the door and walked away. My mate and I looked at each other, trying to show we weren't scared or fooled by the screw. "Hey mate, he's a lying bastard, eh?" I said. "Yeah," my mate replied. "Look out the window." I threw back at him. "Nah, can't be bothered." "You look out." "Nah, I'm going back to sleep." I reckon that neither of us got much sleep that night, but we weren't looking out any window either. It's daylight, and I chance a peek. No tower, no screw with a gun. It is just an exercise yard with crims walking up and down. I think back to last night and wish to hell I was at home.
During that first stint behind bars, Ross was challenged to a fight by another inmate.
I can't understand this, as I don't even know him and haven't done anything wrong. My mate explained that as a new boy I'm being tested to see if I can fight or have the guts to stand up for myself. Scared of the unknown, I go down to the sluice room. I get the shit kicked out of me, but manage to keep my self-respect. Welcome to Waikaria.
The lesson Ross learnt that day never left him.
It doesn't matter if you can't fight, just as long as you have a go. When these bullies see that they have to fight for what they want, 9 out of 10 would rather not and tend to leave you alone.
Several months into his stay, Ross earned a new label, one prison authorities would use more than once in his career: escape artist.
I told the boss that I was going to get some more mix and took off across the paddocks. My big escape. I think I ran for about 2 hours before the screws chasing me caught up. Sentence: 3 months extension of sentence and placed in penal grade. So much for the great escape.
In Ross's memoir, he's clear, like his mum told the reporter, his Waikaria spell, one meant to put him on the right path, instead sent him careering down the wrong one.
Borstal trains you well for a life of crime. There's an old saying that Borstal is the kindergarten, prison the school, and Paremarima the university.
During the next decade, Ross honed those criminal qualifications. 1969 saw him convicted for assault and then sent to prison for burglary, theft and stealing cars.
Life was a dare. My mates and I lived for today and had heaps of fun. The trouble was that it didn't last long.
While serving that sentence, Ross again escaped from a working party but was recaptured by an off-duty prison guard later that night in a bar. As the 1970s rocked on, Ross racked up more and more convictions for car thefts and burglaries, heading back behind bars in 1973.
Short stints in jail became the norm and turned to longer sentences. On reflection, I think that was and has been half of my trouble over the years. Boredom, craving excitement and wanting things the easy way all played a part.
In 1975, Ross again walked out the revolving prison door.
Over the next 12 months I worked at different jobs, flattered here and there, but still couldn't settle. There were a few different ladies in my life, although nothing serious, and I started hanging out doing burgs on a regular basis. It was mainly petty crime to bring in a bit extra and to add spice to life.
I spoke with a man who hung out with Ross in the 1970s. They did jobs together, the illegal kind. I agreed not to name him, but here's what he told me, voiced by an actor.
I don't think Ross knew what his real purpose was in life. I think he had this fantasy about getting hooked up with crime syndicates and becoming someone known and recognised in the criminal element. He was trying to find himself in some way, and I think looking in those directions, he thought he could be somebody. I think he had watched too many of those mafia programs on TV.
Ross is far from unintelligent. A judge once told him he would have made a good lawyer, the way he handled his own case.
But Ross had no aspirations of a career in the law. Instead, his next move was into the criminal big leagues, the daring robbery of a Penrose bank on the 3rd of June, 1976.
One day a mate, I will call Nigel, came round for a talk. He suggested that I might be interested in a bank job, an armed robbery. This was different, a whole new ball game, and perhaps that was what appealed to me. We discussed plans and decided a third person was needed, 1 driver and 2 to go into the bank. We contacted a guy we knew, I will call Bruce, who agreed that he would be in.
Ross, Nigel and Bruce stole 2 rifles and a shotgun to use in the heist. They also got hold of some dog chains and padlocks to tie up people in the bank because they couldn't find handcuffs.
On the day, Bruce and I donned overalls, gloves and masks, while Nigel stayed behind the wheel. We had decided who would be the getaway driver because Bruce and I had worked together before. Bruce and I walked into the bank armed with a cut-down .303 and a sawn-off shotgun.
I've heard another account of what went down that day from someone who was there. They've asked to be anonymous. Just to remind you, throughout this podcast, many people have been given pseudonyms. For some, it's because the events of this story happened so long ago, and for many, their current lives are vastly different. For others, it's because naming them could breach a court suppression order. Anyway, according to this person who was at the bank, when Ross and his co-offender arrived at the door, Ross got cold feet and tried to turn and run. His co-offender had to point his gun at Ross and effectively force him to go through with the heist.
"Freeze," we shouted, and proceeded to tie up the staff members while 2 or 3 customers lay face down on the floor. When another man had entered the bank, I told him I had a shotgun and to lie down. We removed money from the teller's counter. 5 minutes later, we walked out with just under $20,000.
But I can remember getting the call, and I think it was late morning. I was regional crime squad, so they asked us to come and help.
William Merritt was a young detective on patrol when news of the robbery buzzed over the radio.
And I remember the bank. I can picture the bank quite clearly in Penrose. And so it was my job to check out the bank, anything I could see in it, but just to make sure that no one entered so that the forensics could go in and do their job.
The cops got lucky because Ross and his crew were sloppy. 3 days after the robbery, police discovered the abandoned getaway car.
They had this Hillman Avenger, I think, car. And what happened, that was later found in Onehunga. Now, that was brought into the Auckland Central Police Station, where I would have searched it, and that's where I found the rifle, the shotgun, some cartridges.
In terms of like your general understanding of the robbery, was it one particularly well planned or executed?
Not really. No. They'd done some planning, but no. If it was well planned, they would have got away with it. But why leave everything in the car? You're virtually saying, well, here I am, here's the car. All the evidence is there, everything you need. So no, it wasn't well planned. It was people looking for money, saw an opportunity.
Our mistakes after that time were our undoing. Easy spending, too much trust in others. I went out on the town with $1,000 and bought a motorcycle for $400. Our own stupidity resulted in our arrest.
That came just 4 days after the robbery, and police eventually recovered more than 14 grand stolen from the bank. All that cash was handed to William Merritt just as he and his police colleagues were nipping out for lunch.
And I remember receiving quite a bit of money, and I had all this in a bag. I think it was in a suitcase actually, and I remember, and we were going to the coffee bar for lunch, and they said, "I'll catch us up." So I did, and I had the suitcase with all this cash in. But at that stage, it wasn't put into any safekeeping or safe because there was still some more coming in. And I remember thinking at the time, you better hang on to this, son, because you'll be in real trouble. So we were probably a little bit more lax than they are these days. Now they'd say, "Oh my God, you can't do that."
One person not laughing was Ross. He was staring down the barrel of a long prison sentence for armed robbery, burglary and forgery.
If you've got a loaded firearm that's cocked and ready to fire, that's pretty bad. There's only one step away from murder. If it didn't have the bullets in it, and if it wasn't, then that'd be different. Or if it had blanks, then that's a different ballgame. But these were not blanks, and these were actually loaded. And that's a worry.
Yeah.
That is a worry.
On the 5th of October 1976, 25-year-old Ross appeared for sentencing before Justice Peter Mann, who would later become famous for heading the Royal Commission into the Erebus plane disaster. Another notable person present that day was the prosecutor Stuart Grieve, who, as it happens, would later prosecute Ross for the murder of Darcy Tahero. Looking over at Ross, Mann was in no mood for leniency, saying, "In each armed robbery, the possibility of murder is never far away, and this is why the courts must always take a stand." Ross got 8 years.
Christ, back to bloody Perry. Would I ever learn? When, over the years, I kept going in and out of prison, I'd think to myself, stuff this, what a waste. Yet I kept backing up for more. I'll never know why. And all the theories, counselling and so-called experts have never been able to tell me. I don't think they know the answers. I wish I did.
After his release in February 1982, Ross quickly fell back into his old ways, breaking into homes and businesses. Ross was caught, and in November 1984, he was jailed for 2.5 years. He was sent to Mount Eden, where his path would eventually collide with a man called Ernie, a serial fraudster who would forever change the direction of Ross's life. So let's get to know Ernie then. As I've said previously, Ernie isn't his real name. His true identity is suppressed by a court order, which limits what I can tell you about him. But here's what I can say. Ernie was in his 20s when Darcy Tahira was killed. Already a seasoned con man, he was in Mount Eden on more than 200 convictions for fraud. He took $73,000 from his employer, which wasn't bad for someone earning just $11,000 a year. Ernie later told Ross's trial,
"I'm not proud of any of it. It's happened. Not a hell of a lot can be done about it."
That included not paying back a cent to his victim. It was a far cry from the rural values Ernie learned growing up in the 60s and 70s in a small farming community. When I spoke to him, Ernie told me,
"I grew up in a very loving family with no violence, grandparents, parents, aunties, uncles and all that sort of stuff. My family were community people, non-drinkers and non-smokers."
On paper, Ernie's family sounds pretty typical of rural New Zealand. Generations lived in the same area. His dad ran the family farm, which he eventually passed down to Ernie's brother. All in all, you'd say Ernie came from good stock. A police bio described him as a willing, cheerful, cooperative member of his family, and by his own account, tidy.
I can't stand mess.
But things were about to get really messy. At school, Ernie had been a bit of a loner.
He left school around the age of 15 and moved straight into trade-type roles.
Investigator Tim McKenna was working for Julia Appelgren, trying to have her late husband's conviction overturned posthumously. The key to that will be trying to prove Ernie lied about seeing Ross kill Darcy. Tim's reviewed police documents about Ernie's past.
He grew up, from what I can see, in a relatively stable family, but pretty quickly came off the rails as he got into his late teens. Pretty quickly, he descends into dishonesty-type offending.
Though the way Ernie tells it, he was more a victim of circumstance.
At this stage of my life, I was about 21, 22 years old, and having lived a rather sheltered life, moved in Auckland in a completely different circle, hence became involved in all sorts of strange events, and not knowing how to cope, people used perhaps the nicer side of my nature. And it was then I became involved in 2 jobs, women and large flatting commitment. I changed my job to another company and events took place which placed me in court to face the theft charge of a ring and gear in my garage flat that belonged to my employer at that stage.
That was in 1979. Ernie was convicted of 3 theft charges and given 6 months of periodic detention.
My parents paid several thousand to a lawyer in Auckland. It gave us a bum deal. I did not appeal to the conviction as I had no knowledge of the court system then. Looking back now to that time, I wish I could have done that, made the appeal. Perhaps life would have been different.
Tellingly, a police report from the period labelled Ernie as, quote, an inveterate liar. That's a pretty damning description of a guy whose veracity the police would later rely on to convict Ross Appelgren of murder.
They are the police's words in describing him well before either of the trials.
Like so many pieces of information, police calling Ernie an inveterate liar was not disclosed to the juries that decided Ross's fate.
Absolutely, it should have been disclosed, and Defence Counsel would have made good use of that because that was recorded by police officers that had nothing to do with this case.
Also of interest to Tim was another internal police assessment of Ernie's character.
He's a reasonably intelligent and shrewd person. He was described as a very good salesman and as a very smooth talker. And I would say that they are descriptions that would typically fit a good fraudster. It seems to be that he has a real preference for getting himself into positions of trust and then ripping people who trust him off. And that seems to be his preferred MO.
In 1982, Ernie's sticky fingers were soon at it again. He was jailed for 10 months for taking $23,000 in customer checks from yet another employer.
The fraud offenders that I've dealt with tend to be very, very good talkers, quite convincing, and they're able to trick people, and they're really effective and at deception, and they can do it to all sorts of people, and it's a real art form.
That marries up with what Ross's lawyer Bob Hesketh described he'd learned about Ernie's slippery past, or X as Ernie's referred to, in this 1989 Radio Pacific interview.
Incidentally, I have recently spoken to a person who's had, if I can put it this way, professional and substantial professional dealings with the witness X over a long period of time. And this professional person describes X as being a pathological liar who will lie just for the sake of it. And she says that during the time that she was associated with him, he, for example, had a string of girlfriends, none of whom knew about the other. And it came as a great shock when all of that came to light on some subsequent occasion.
By 1983, Ernie had talked himself into a new sales job, though as his manager would later tell police, while Ernie was industrious, he was, quote, less than honest in other ways. The manager described how Ernie had explained a trip to Fiji as being for treatment of cancer. And when he was asked about his affluence, he accounted for it by saying that he had sold a section or sold a yacht. But the real source of Ernie's newly found wealth was soon to be discovered. It turned out that over the course of 18 months, he defrauded his boss out of tens of thousands of dollars.
In 1984, I was a trainee detective stationed at Newmarket Police Station.
When Ernie's offending was uncovered in mid-1984, it was assigned to Auckland detective Dave Pizzini to investigate.
And all the cheques were deposited into some accounts that he had set up under a false name. But eventually there was an audit that was carried out where discrepancies were found.
He knew we were trying to find him, locate him, and interview him with regards to these frauds, but we couldn't find him.
Former Police Sergeant Tony Bouchier worked with Dave when the investigation into Ernie began.
It was a huge fraud. He knew he was going to be doing bucket loads of porridge, and he just couldn't face the music.
But in August 1984, Dave Pizzini got a tip.
I got a phone call from somebody who said that my suspect was visiting a friend at a car dealership on Great North Road, Grey Lynn, on his way to the airport, where he was going to be hopping onto a plane and buying a cash ticket one way to Australia.
Dave grabbed his partner, Detective Bill Ferguson.
And we raced over to John Andrew Ford at Great North Road. At the same time we pulled up, we were parking our car when saw us and sped off. He did a U-turn on Great North Road and drove east, and we had a car pursuit around a number of city streets.
I hear Dave Pizzini on the radio saying that they've located him, but he's trying to flee and they're chasing him.
Tony Bouchier was in another patrol car when he heard about the pursuit in progress, reaching speeds of more than 110 kilometres an hour.
I joined the fray, and I could listen to the commentary over the radio as to where they were going. Then there was a bit of radio silence, and because they said he was going over the bridge.
That was Auckland's Harbour Bridge, an 8-lane bridge connecting the CBD to the North Shore.
They were right up his ass.
He manoeuvred his way to the outside lane of the northbound lanes of the Harbour Bridge, and he stopped all of a sudden at the very top of the bridge, and he jumped out of his car, left the car running with the driver's door open, and then he climbed over the fence, and then he dangled himself off the edge of the bridge.
Wait.
And yeah.
Hands, feet dangling below the bridge.
In the meantime, Bill stopped the car. I jumped out of the passenger's side of the car. I ran to the railing where was, and I sort of leaned over the barrier and I grabbed onto his hands. Bill, in the meantime, ran up behind me and held onto my belt so that I didn't fall. And I hung on to his arms, or one of his arms at one stage, but I hung on to his arms.
It was high drama, 45 metres above the water below.
It was only a matter of time before he was going to, his grip would loosen and he would fall. When you're leaning over the rail looking straight down at the water, it's a bloody long way. So I hung on to him for dear life.
By now, Tony Boucher had pulled up on the bridge.
I could see that David was getting very tired.
All I was thinking at the time was, I've got two choices. Either pull this man to safety and we'll lock him up for the matters I was investigating him for, or I'd be spending the rest of my time typing up a sudden death file, because there's no way he was going to survive the fall.
Until you stand at the top of that bridge and you look over the side, you don't realise how far down it is. It's a long way. I can recall seeing a seagull, it looked like a speck down on the water.
And all the while I was talking to him, so I knew his name. I was saying, hey, you know, you've got a partner and kids that love you, and, you know. And he kept saying, I don't want to go back to prison. I don't want to go back to prison. And he just kept repeating that.
In the nick of time, a tow truck driver arrived and handed police a rope to pull Ernie back over the rail.
I can just remember being extremely relieved that the help was there. Yeah, because I was getting tired. We were able to lift him up and over the railing to safety. And then he was handcuffed and arrested and put in the back of the car, and we took him to the police station for processing.
For his actions that day, Dave received a Royal Humane Society Award for bravery. The dramatic rescue also made the papers.
So the headline in this article is "Strong Arm of Law Stops Bridge Jump."
Yeah, one of many incidents that I've been involved with that I'll never forget.
Despite Dave saving his life, Ernie initially wasn't interested in helping Dave close his fraud case.
Well, he pleaded not guilty initially, but after depositions, when he was committed for trial, he pleaded guilty to all of the charges.
And as I said, there were a lot of charges, 209 in total.
And he was sentenced to a period of imprisonment at Mount Eden Prison.
3 years, 3 months. The judge told Ernie, "It seems to me you are basically a dishonest person and the public need to be protected from you." But less than a year later, the Crown held Ernie up as a truth teller, the star witness in their murder case against Ross Appelgren. And that transformation is a whole story on its own. Coming up on the next episode of Nark. Thanks for listening to Nark, hosted and written by me, Mike Wesley-Smith. I'm also extremely grateful to everyone who spoke with me for this podcast, especially Suzanne Young and Julia Appelgren. And if anyone listening has more information about this case, I'd be keen to hear from you. Send an email to nark@rnz.co.nz. Follow and listen to Nark wherever you get your podcasts, and if you've enjoyed it, use the share button to recommend it to a friend. Some more quick thank yous to Ngā Taonga and Mediaworks for some of the archival audio, and to the voice actors who helped bring some of the characters in this episode to life: Nigel Collins, Craig Ginty, Kay Garton, and Suamalo Schwager. The RNZ producers who worked on this episode were Liz Garton, William Ray, Duncan Smith, and Justin Gregory. The audio engineer was William Saunders. Thanks also to Steve Burridge and Jeremy Ansell for the studio wrangling, and to Kevin Golding for opening the doors to me every week after hours. Graphics were designed by Amrita Marks, and the shorthand page, where you can find more information on this story, was made by Hing-Yi Kong. Check it out at rnz.co.nz/nark. Tim Watkin is RNZ's Executive Editor Audio, and Brianna Uritich-Gregg is the Production Coordinator. You can find more of RNZ's great podcasts, like Thrift, on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Check them out. Bye for now.